Kind of wrap up, we're going to go back to some of the policies that are in place in sport. And I didn't put all of them in. I just did a presentation recently that I can talk more about in regards to the IOC policies, which are the least inclusive, by the way. So IOC was the first, International Olympic Committee. The NCAA then decided, again, this is one of those never-in-my-lifetime moments. I went to was invited to the NCAA offices for a transgender inclusive think tank. How do we include trans athletes in our NCAA sports? And I'm like, really? Okay. So out of that came a white paper, and from the white paper came a policy that the NCAA has. It's not incredibly inclusive, but it's a step, right? And so you can get this if you're an NCAA institution. I know you are. You can go to the NCAA website and download this, as well as a new resource guide that we've created for institutions for LGBTQ inclusivity around sport. And I know it's been a tough time for you all here the last month in athletics. Given where I come from, you know that we've also had our share of stuff. But athletics, the attention that athletics get in Division I institutions is incredible. And so if we can make some inroads in Division I athletics around these issues, that also then moves the institution forward because we get more media attention around it. In addition, we have a number of pro sports. We're right now working with a project called You Can Play with Patrick Burke, and a number of pro sports and pro team owners. The NHL already signed on, so that National Hockey League actually has a policy for inclusivity around LGBTQ players. And when you can get the very well-known hockey and football and basketball players talking about inclusivity of LGBTQ issues, that has a huge impact. It trickles down to the rest of us in sport. So again, I'm not going to read all of this, but you get an idea that the NCAA is making an effort, and it's happened only within the last couple of years. Intramural athletics, there are a number of athletes who are not in Division I playing NCAA sports, but are very active in their institutional intramural policies. There's a great one at UMass Amherst that I've posted here for you to look at. And I haven't put the others up here, but there are, and this is more very inclusive as well, but there are a number of K through 12 institutions statewide that now have policies. Massachusetts, Connecticut, and Washington State have incredibly inclusive policies for K through 12 kids. And there are a lot of trans kids right now who want to compete. And we have a number of them actually in my little town of State College, a little gymnast who is incredibly talented, birth sex male, assigned sex male, competing as a little girl, and is very talented and has had some issues. But to the little town's credit, they're allowing her to compete. Now, how long that'll happen, we need to kind of think about that. But again, there are policies that you can look at if you're interested in some of the K through 12 things that are happening. So in the classroom, what do? So I'm a faculty member and an educator and a big proponent that the only time we have students when they're a captive audience is the classroom, period. Okay, you're going to have these kind of conferences. Who comes is the choir, or if it's required by a faculty member to come and get signed off on something because you came, right? So how do we make this more inclusive within the classrooms that we teach? And faculty, I think, for the most part, want to do the right thing. But faculty who are my age and older, we never had this training when I was in college. I didn't know what trans was when I was in college. I mean, I knew, but the rest of my faculty didn't ever talk about it, right? So we didn't have diversity training. So think about generationally, students, give the faculty a break sometimes, I'm trying to tell you, okay? Because a lot of folks don't know, but want to know what to do. They want to know the right thing to do and how to be more inclusive. So if we could offer some of these ideas, it may be helpful. Don't assume that everyone in the classroom is cisgender or traditionally gendered, right? And I can use an LGBTQ example in this. I had just came from an institution yesterday where I was reporting out on their climate study, and it's a very large engineering institution. I'll just leave it at that. And a young African-American young man came to me as part of the project in a focus group and said, this is what my experience was. I'm, African-American, I'm 6'2", and I walked into my first engineering class, and the first thing the professor asked me was what? What sport do you play? Now, that faculty member was not trying to be dismissive in any way, right? They were trying to engage a student in a conversation, and yet the student said, I'm not an athlete, I just want to be an engineer, right? So I think you can think about that also in the cisgender kind of a way. Respect students' gender identity and express by using their preferred names and pronouns, If you call on the roll the first day of class, this is a big one, and have students introduce themselves or call students by their last names, allow them to say what their first name is, right? Because if you call it off, it could be not the same as what they prefer, and then you've got this whole thing about, okay, do I tell them who I am? Do I use my other name? I don't know, right? So hard for the student. It's a relatively small-sized class. Have students indicate the pronouns they prefer. Everybody, okay? So a lot of students talk to me about being identified as the resident expert on everything because I am X, and the faculty member says, so what do you think? And it's not because of my expertise in the area, but because I am gender nonconforming in some way, right? If it's a large class size, try to avoid referring to students by any pronoun. That's a hard task. And I got called out actually at the NGLTF convention conference about 10 years ago. I did a presentation. And at the end of the presentation, I asked for questions. And so I walked up and I said, I can't move around, right? All right, so I walked up and I said, so, are there any questions? And the person in the back raised their hand and I said, yes, sir. And they said, how do you know I'm a sir? I'm like, oh, sorry. It's just, my Italian heritage. I got to try and be respectful, but you're right. Anyway, also in the classroom, where relevant, encourage the discussion of transgender topics in your class. And you can do this. I teach physiology. I can do it in physiology. I can do it anywhere, right? Don't rely on trans students to initiate discussions on the topics. We should not expect our students to be the teachers, right? Although I would encourage that oftentimes peer education is probably one of the best ways for our students to learn. Use trans-inclusive materials and examples in classes, not just the humanities. Correct students who use trans-inclusive language and challenge their transgender comments. And that's like a daily thing. Okay, do I do it today or not? How long do I have in my class period to take out of my lesson to be able to do this? Encourage students to do research on trans topics. I'm a very big proponent of this, so we've got lots of work. There is such a rich field of research here that people can do work in. And then show support for students and events. So when there is a trans event, go as a cisgender person, right? It's an amazing amount of support. Our women's volleyball coach is the winningest volleyball coach in national collegiate volleyball history. He comes to every national coming out day, our rally, every year, and brings his team, who are mostly cisgender and identifying as heterosexual. So that show of support is amazing, and what happens in turn is, when they have their volleyball games, who shows up in droves at the volleyball games? The whole queer community, right? So, okay, so we'll stop there. We're right at 10:30, so I apologize for going a little bit over. I want to ask if you have questions.